I spent the first 20 years of my life dreaming of being an oceanographer. I dreamt of saving the whales. I then spent the next 25 years of my life building a career in oceanography. I became an expert on the Gulf of Maine, the waters just offshore here off of Boston. I spent most of my time working with computer models, with data, with math and statistics, but occasionally I got out on the water, and occasionally I got to see things like this, a North Atlantic right whale, which I did actually get to study, along with plankton and fish and the whole part of the ecosystem. Here's a better picture of a right whale. And while things were going great, everything began to change in 2012. In 2012, the Gulf of Maine experienced the first marine heat wave documented for any US waters. And so my colleagues and I went out with a deliberate effort to understand what this meant. So I rallied teams, we did studies on plankton, on fish, on lobsters, and of course on whales. And we were having a lot of success. We were getting a lot of attention, getting papers in Science magazine, doing everything that scientists should do. But I was angry. I was frustrated, and it was showing up to my friends, to my family, to my colleagues. I was so angry because I was watching this ecosystem that I'd worked so hard to get to be able to study being torn apart. Every day was just a new casualty. All because of climate change, because of a problem that we knew about, right? The consensus that humans were warming the planet emerged when I was in high school. We had the technology, we had great policy ideas, we just weren't getting them out there. And I was watching now this ecosystem fall apart. So around that time, I took up running to try to relieve the stress. I also tried to think about, well, what was it that was bringing me joy? And I realized that the thing that I enjoyed the most was actually talking to the press, talking to the media. I loved the challenge of distilling a complex scientific idea down to something bite-sized that could work within the context of a story that could then be transmitted to people all over the state or all over the world. And so in 2020, I made a career shift. I moved with my family in the middle of the pandemic to New Jersey to work on climate communication and climate science full-time. One of the first things I learned once I started working on climate communications was that I wasn't alone. People actually care about climate change, even in the United States. People are worried and they're curious. The challenge is that we don't hear about it. Fewer than a third of people report hearing about climate change in the media, whether that's online or whether that's in traditional media. And that means we're not talking about it. We are not going to solve a problem that we don't hear about and don't talk about, no matter how much we care about it alone in our own heads. And so that's what I do now. I'm now working to try to break this communications barrier down. My job right now is to create really interesting, novel science content and then work with my colleagues who are designers, graphics engineers, who are software engineers, and communication specialists who can then get that into a form that the media and ultimately people like you can use to talk about climate change. And we're really good. Last year, over 100 media stories per day used our materials to tell people about climate change. One of the secrets that we've learned, and a key part of our strategy, is to make climate change local. Climate change isn't something that's going to hit us in 30 years. It's something that's hitting us right now, right where we live. And weather is a great way to make that connection. For example, 2 weeks ago, Hurricane Melissa hit Jamaica as a devastating Category 5 hurricane, a devastating and deadly storm. The day before that storm, using peer-reviewed methodology, my colleagues and I were able to release this statement that said that climate change was adding to the wind speeds, making this storm more damaging. And I think it's really important that we did this before the storm happened, before landfall, based on the forecasts. That's because by making the link between the storm and climate change, we opened up the potential for this to be described as a climate event. Subsequent studies came in and then enriched that. But we only get a few hurricanes per year, thankfully, so we built a system where we can look at air temperature every day. And so, for example, this week is unusually mild across much of Europe, and in Oslo, Norway, their mild temperatures are 5 times more likely because of climate change. You can see similar patterns this summer during the heat wave that hit the US East Coast. The other thing we try to do is to make climate change personal. And I love to play a game with people. If you tell me that you're interested in something or passionate about something, I bet I can connect it to climate change. And I think this is so important for communications because this is how people are going to start talking about it with their friends. So maybe you're talking to me around the block and you're frustrated about all the pollen that you're having to clear off of your car. Well, all of that pollen is because of all of the extra CO2 we've put into the atmosphere that's made the plants excited. They produce more pollen, it gets on your car, and it makes you sneeze. Maybe you're going to complain to me about insurance. I'll complain right back. And then we'll look at the map of the US billion-dollar weather and climate disasters. This is a data set that was killed by the federal government in the spring, but that we resuscitated this fall. It's an absolutely critical data set that shows how climate change is leading to additional costs. We went from a few billion-dollar disasters per year a couple of decades ago to now $1 to $2 billion disasters every month in the United States. This is a real drag. You might also bond with me about running, and you might say, hey, I qualified for the Boston Marathon, and I'll say, congratulations, that is a huge achievement. Hey, did you know that cool weather conditions are going to make you run faster? Conditions much like we're experiencing here in Boston today. And that those conditions, they're actually pretty common in April when the races run in Boston. They'll occur about 3/4 of the time, which is above average for most of the major marathons. But climate change is going to make those conditions rarer and rarer. And this led to one of my most proudest achievements as a scientist, not getting into Science magazine, not getting into Nature, but getting into Runner's World and Women's Health. And that's because these publications are never going to cover the UN climate change negotiations. They're never going to cover the latest IPCC report, but here they are using our materials to talk to their readers about how climate change is affecting something that they care very deeply about. So, I can't say that I'm happy. I don't think anybody who works on climate change is really, truly happy. But I do think the work that we're doing is important, and it gives me hope. We are not going to get any of the wonderful solutions that people are talking about here this week to the scale that we need to actually make a difference without the public will behind it, and we're not going to get that public will until we close this communications gap. So while I spend my days now talking to people about the weather, deep down I know I'm really saving the whales. Thank you.